When sensitive information is shared with people outside the formal employment relationship, contractors, partners, prospects, or suppliers, a contractual mechanism is needed to protect it. Control A.6.6 of ISO 27001, 2022 addresses confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements, the legal instruments that define what must be kept confidential, by whom, and for how long. In this video, we explore NDA types, the key clauses every agreement must contain, and when to use them. Let us begin. Let us examine what Control A.6.6 requires, and how NDAs serve as a formal mechanism for protecting confidential information shared with individuals and organizations. Control A.6.6 requires that confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements are used whenever confidential information is shared with personnel or third parties outside the formal employment contract. Mutual NDAs, also called bilateral NDAs, are appropriate when both parties will be exchanging confidential information. This is typical in partnership negotiations, joint venture discussions, and supplier relationships where the supplier also shares proprietary methodology or commercial information with the organization. A mutual NDA creates symmetric obligations. Both parties must protect the other's confidential information to the same standard, and is appropriate whenever the information flow is genuinely bidirectional. Mutual NDAs are more complex to draft, but better reflect the reality of most business relationships. One-way NDAs, also called unilateral NDAs, are appropriate when only one party is disclosing confidential information. This is typical when briefing a potential supplier who has not yet been appointed, when onboarding a contractor who will access client data, or when sharing technical architecture with a consultant. The receiving party is bound, the disclosing party is not. One-way NDAs are simpler to draft and more appropriate where the information flow is clearly one-directional. Choosing the wrong type creates either unnecessary obligations or inadequate protection. Defining confidential information with sufficient precision is one of the most important drafting decisions in any NDA. An agreement that defines confidential information as anything marked confidential may exclude significant categories of sensitive information that are never labeled. An agreement that defines it as all information exchanged may be so broad as to be commercially unworkable. We use a hybrid definition, specific categories of information combined with a marking requirement for written disclosures, that is both precise enough to be enforceable and broad enough to protect the full range of sensitive information the relationship will involve. Duration, exceptions, and remedies are the operational provisions that determine whether an NDA is practically useful when it matters. The duration must be realistic. Perpetual NDAs for general confidential information are often unenforceable, while 2 to 5 years is standard for most commercial contexts and indefinite for genuine trade secrets. Exceptions for information already in the public domain, known before disclosure, or required by law must be included. Remedies should specify that the disclosing party is entitled to seek injunctive relief without proving financial loss. The most important remedy when confidential information is about to be disclosed to a competitor. 4 key concepts that define how confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements function under ISO 27001, 2022. NDA scope is the provision that determines whether the agreement actually protects what we need to protect. Scope that is too narrow leaves categories of sensitive information unprotected. Scope that is too broad may be commercially unreasonable and therefore unenforceable. We recommend defining scope by reference to specific categories: customer data, technical architecture, pricing models, HR data, product roadmaps, supplemented by a catch-all for information clearly identified as confidential at the time of disclosure. This hybrid approach provides comprehensive protection without creating obligations so broad that the receiving party reasonably cannot comply. Permitted disclosures are the controlled exceptions that make NDAs commercially workable. Without them, an NDA would prevent the receiving party from seeking legal advice about the very agreement they are signing. Standard permitted disclosures include disclosure to the party's own legal and financial advisors under equivalent confidentiality obligations, disclosure required by law or regulatory authority, and disclosure with prior written consent of the disclosing party. The permitted disclosures section must be drafted carefully. Overly permissive exceptions can create gaps that the receiving party can exploit to share information more broadly than intended. Review and renewal of NDAs is required because commercial relationships evolve. An NDA signed at the beginning of a supplier engagement may not cover new categories of information shared as the relationship deepens, may not reflect updated regulatory requirements for data handling, and may have expired before the relationship has ended. We maintain an NDA register that includes review dates, relationship status, and the categories of information currently being shared. Annual review of active NDAs ensures that the protection remains current and that expired agreements are renewed or replaced before sensitive information continues to be shared without contractual coverage. Enforceability is the practical test of whether an NDA actually protects the organization when it matters most. An NDA that has not been signed by an authorized representative of the receiving party, that lacks consideration, or that contains provisions that are unenforceable in the governing jurisdiction may provide the appearance of protection without the substance. We ensure that every NDA is executed correctly, that the governing law is appropriate for the jurisdictions involved, and that the organization's own signature authority policy has been followed. Legal review of NDA templates before they are used operationally is a worthwhile investment. Now let us look at how to implement an NDA program that ensures confidential information is legally protected across all the relationships where it is shared. Effective NDA management requires pre-approved templates, clear triggers for when NDAs must be signed, a central register, and periodic review of active agreements. Pre-approved NDA templates remove the delay and inconsistency that arise when NDAs are drafted from scratch for each engagement. We maintain templates for the most common relationship types: employee NDAs embedded in contracts, contractor NDAs for non-employed individuals with system access, mutual NDAs for partner and prospect discussions, and supplier NDAs for third parties with access to customer or sensitive business data. Each template is reviewed and approved by legal counsel, creating a library of agreements that can be deployed quickly and consistently without requiring legal review on every occasion. Defining organizational triggers ensures that NDAs are executed proactively rather than reactively. Common triggers include sharing product roadmaps with potential partners, beginning procurement processes where technical or financial data will be shared with bidders, onboarding contractors who will access customer data, engaging consultants who will review security architecture or internal systems, and entering joint venture discussions. We document these triggers in the IS policy and train relevant teams, sales, procurement, HR, legal, to initiate the NDA process before sensitive information is shared rather than after the fact. A central NDA register provides the management visibility and audit evidence that Control A.6.6 requires. The register captures the parties to each agreement, the scope of confidential information covered, the effective date, the duration, the expiry date, and the current status of the relationship. We maintain the register in a system that generates alerts as agreements approach expiry, preventing inadvertent disclosure of sensitive information after the protective agreement has lapsed. The register is also the reference point for auditors assessing whether the organization maintains appropriate confidentiality coverage across its relationships. Annual review of active NDAs ensures that the protection remains appropriate as relationships evolve. We check whether the scope of information being shared has expanded beyond what the agreement covers, whether the parties are still the correct legal entities, whether the duration provisions remain enforceable and appropriate, and whether the governing law clauses remain suitable for the current operating context. Where changes are needed, we initiate updated or replacement agreements and document the review outcome in the NDA register as evidence of ongoing governance. Let us bring together the essential points from our exploration of Control A.6.6, confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements. If you want to implement all Annexa controls with confidence, our complete Udemy course on ISO 27001, 2022 security controls provides detailed implementation guidance, NDA templates, and audit evidence checklists for every control. Enroll today and build your ISO 27001 expertise. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe for more ISO 27001 control breakdowns. See you in the next video.